Hello there, my name is Elise, and today we're going to do a little follow-up to the Time Savers video on using gradients, and we are going to have a look at lazy unwrapping. So lazy unwrapping is something that you would use in combination with gradients, for instance, and it's a way to texture your models and UV your models by not spending too much time, but just being smart about how you lay out your model. So it's a lazy unwrap because we're going to go fast. We are going to unwrap and therefore texture these two models with about 10 minutes spent on each one of them. So first of all, we're having a go at this little monster guy. These are old models of mine that were not specifically made for this video, so it's to show you how it would go on similar looking models. So first of all, we unwrapped, we made a planar unwrap on the side view since it's easier to manipulate, and then we placed our big guy along that gradient. And now we're separating the boots and moving them on the side, so we have this leathery brownish color texture. Now we're selecting the belt and we're going to move to that similar brownish leather color. And I missed a bunch of the belt because I didn't have a look around the entire piece. Going to notice it now. Not a big issue. It's because I have a little triangle on the side that prevents me from making a loop selection. Here I'm using 3ds Max, but you can use any 3D software package that allows you to edit the UVs. So any package that allows you to unwrap your model will work. Taking a little bit of the belt, selecting those pants, and we're going to make them red. So we're moving them to the red gradient, like so. Thinking about what I need to do next. So we're going to move on to probably the eyes. Nope. So I decided to break off the color on the chest. So I have this pattern that was modeled in from previously, so I'm going to follow that pattern and pick a few shapes, and then I'm going to break those off from the rest of the body, and that's going to allow me to have another to have more color variation than just the gradient on the just the blue gradient on the belly. So picking all the faces that I want to have, that I want to be the same color. Here I'm picking the wrong polygons. You could actually just, if your model is perfectly symmetrical, you should just delete half of it and then use a symmetry modifier on your model to just apply the same edit on the other side. But here my model isn't perfectly symmetrical. There's this a bit of leather on the belt buckle. So here I'm going for this blue to green gradient that I have. So the belly is a slightly different color than the rest of the body. Here I'm going to pick the entire eyes and move them towards that yellow to white gradient. So it's a bit of an off-white. Gonna pick the... I modeled in those the highlights of the eyes. That way we have, we don't even need to texture them in. We'll have that little highlight. It's going to be not symmetrical. So it's going to be look a little better than if it were symmetrical, because the highlight is in the same position. So it should be, if it's on the left, it should be on the left on both eyes, not a left and right on the other eye. Make the eye color darker blue, made it bigger so there's this gradient to work with. Decided to make it brown because I thought it would be a better better color to go with the blue skin tone. Move the pupil to the black. So now we have that little highlight. Black eyes gives it a bit of life. What's missing? We're about 7 minutes in, so we pretty decent for just 7 minutes. I didn't do the gradient with any specific model in mind, so I created all these gradients beforehand, trying to have a bit of variation. Here I'm breaking off the top and the bottom of the belt, so that way I can move them further apart. So that way the bottom is a slightly darker, more saturated color, and the top is a slightly lighter and a yellow color that gives it a bit of a shading effect. The teeth, gonna go for that off-white color. Made them taller, so there's a bit of the gradient working on them. Now I'm going to pick some faces of the body, and then I'm going to break them off like we did before, so I can move them higher in the gradient. That way, where the light would hit, so the when there are big transitions of sharp edges that would be facing towards the light, if I break them apart and move them up, they will receive a highlight, and that will help shade the model in a way. Cheap way to shade the model. Like I said in the time savers video, you are dependent on your model. So if you want to have something specific, if you want to have a specific shade, a specific pattern or something, then you'll need to have that model in. Here I'm trying to move them downwards without breaking them off, but it doesn't really work. Looks a bit off. Also, there's an issue with my version of Max. For some reason, I am not seeing the smoothing groups. So it's not really an issue here on this model since it's organic, but on the sword, not having the not being able to see the smoothing groups is a bit of an annoyance. Here I'm picking the entire body and moving it slightly downwards on the gradient because I thought it was a bit too light up top. And we're 10 minutes in, so we're a little bit over time. Here I just want to select the inside of the eyes. It's kind of a weird selection to make. See if I can pick both sides on this in one go using side view, but it's a bit of a tricky selection. So we're going to pick some loops. We're going to grow our selection, then we're going to break it off and go towards the red, just to give it more of a monstery look and just to break off the colors a bit more. Here we're gonna break the top of that belly button and move it upwards, and do the same thing with the bottom just to add some shading effects. And that's gonna wrap it up for this model. So yeah, 12 minutes. Went a bit over time with that model. Oh no, I'm adding more shading. But just to show you that if you're going for something very stylized, very flat shaded look, you can texture 6 characters, 5 or 6 characters in an hour, using a single texture sheet, like we saw in that Time Savers video. That if you did not see, I advise you to have a look at it. Here I'm struggling with those smoothing groups that are not showing up. So now we're moving on towards the sword that we're going to texture in the same fashion, using the same texture. Take our sword, move it into position. Now we're going to break them off. So this is going to be a more gold color. And these two parts are going to be the same color as well. Just put them lower down in the gradient. I'm gonna make the wrapped hilt be red. Going to move the bigger part of the blade to be a gray color. And here already you could, if you're looking for going for a very stylized look, you could already export this to your model. If the smoothing groups worked, which it doesn't now, so you're missing a bit of the edge, the sharp edges. So I tried removing them, put them back on using auto smoothing groups. Nothing works, so I think it's working, it's just not showing up for some reason. So we're moving the sharp part of the blade to another gradient. And then we're going to break off all of these different curves to the blade, so that way we can shade them in different ways. Make the highlight be a little different. trying to move them apart so they're not too similar. So that way, if there's a big difference, if there's a significant difference in the shading, it'll read better. It's a little bit too dark. So essentially moving them around, looking at the results in real time, trying to choose which one goes where, how to break off that shading so it reads as different blades. Trying to turn them around so it shades differently from top to bottom, or since they are curving in one direction and some of them are curving in another direction, so turning them and moving them around. Too bad. Shame about the shading though. Since the smoothing groups are not working, we have some shading artifacts happening. You can see the triangles not resolving properly. About 6 minutes in. Not too bad. Here we're gonna break off some of those patterns, some of those facets, so we can have a bit of a highlight to them. So moving them down in the gradient so it's a little more obvious. Moving those down, scaling this up so the gradient is a bit more pronounced. Changing my mind, decide to break them up into 3 parts. So there's a top, bottom, and a middle part, with the top being lighter than the bottom, like so. Pretty good. And now we're going to try and add some more shading information to the hilt, to the wrapping on the hilt. So we're going to try and pick all the under edges, the undercuts, and then breaking them apart and moving them downwards in the gradient, so that way they are shaded darker. And then we're going to do the same thing with the upper parts, the ones that would receive more light, and then we're going to move those up in the gradient. And the combination of the two should help sell the intent, the illusion of shading. moving those up in the gradient. And that's going to wrap this up for this video. I hope you found it useful. Share, like, and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you guys in the next one.